Hello, reefing friends. Welcome back to Craft Aquatic. I'm Matt G. It has been some time since we've added any fish to the mixed reef, so we have decided to try something new, to us at least, with the addition of a Snowflake Moray Eel. We'll go over all the details, how the process went, how all the fish have adapted to their new roommate, and how the eel settled into its new home. So let's get right to it. Our mixed reef tank has been one of the joys and highlights of our home for nearly 7 years now. If interested in seeing more about this tank, I'll link to videos below so you can check that out. That said, I have been wanting to add an additional member to our fish community just to freshen up and make things a bit more interesting. Recently, my son mentioned enjoying watching a moray eel in an aquarium at a camp he had attended over the summer. It got me thinking, prompted a bit of reading and research as to the compatibility of a snowflake eel in an established mixed reef. Long story short, it turns out many have had great success housing a snowflake eel in a mixed reef environment. I'll go over some of how and why this is possible as we move through this video. There are a number of small to medium-sized moray eels that could potentially work in a mixed reef. You can find other videos about them out on YouTube, and I will link to one of the good ones below. So I settled on a snowflake eel for a number of reasons. Number one, they tend to grow to a reasonable size and have blunt teeth rather than those needle-like piercing teeth that some moray eels have. Number two, I really like the appearance, especially the white snout, which is kind of cute when poking out of little crevices and caves. They can be rambunctious when young, but tend to settle down with age. I'll go over a few more positives and negatives later on. This particular eel came from Petco. I'm not a huge Petco shopper. I tend to rather shop at an LFS, but I had been observing this eel for some time and knew that it was an ideal size and age. Contrary to some misinformation that can be found online, eels do host common fish parasites, so I will be carefully monitoring my fish population for a few weeks after adding him. When introducing a new fish, which I do very infrequently, I like to give them a little motel room for the night in the form of a peaceful hanging basket just inside the main display. In this case, I am adding a small rock to this fish fry container for the eel to curl its nearly 10-inch body around. I find giving them a night's respite allows them to de-stress, continue to acclimate to the new water chemistry, and gives the current residents time to get used to the smell of the new addition. So about an hour of slow drip increases that specific gravity from 0.019 to my level 0.025. In this shot, you can kind of make out those intricate shapes and neat patterns. We also get a better idea of the overall size of the snowflake eel. He's still a juvenile, but not so small that the larger fish in our system will bully him, I hope, which often happens when territories within an established reef are challenged. There are numerous caves and crevices in our mixed reef aquarium. That is by design, but as you can see, many of those spots have been claimed by the current residents. It will be interesting to see where the snowflake eel settles, but more than that, how the current tank mates perceive him as competition or as a threat. For instance, if you peer deep into this cave, there's a large coral-banded shrimp, technically food for moray eels. We have plenty of urchins, which should be safe, but the hermit crabs are also on the menu. I'm hoping that consistent feeding will curb the eel's appetite for all these little critters. The eel is finally in his acclimation basket, which has been attached to the glass with an algae magnet. So far, so good. There seems to be an appearance of relief from the eel's perspective as he wraps his long body around that live rock. Fun fact, snowflake eels are also referred to as clouded moray eels and floral eels, which makes sense with their millefiori-like patterns. These guys are escape artists, so there is a chance that he will make his way into the reef overnight. If he does decide to remain in the basket overnight, I will lower it into the reef before lights on, let him swim out on his own. If the fish give him any trouble, I will use my tried and true mirror technique. Check out the video below if you want to learn about that. Fast forward to the next morning, he did decide to stay in his basket overnight and was lowered into the reef around 7 a.m. Here he is immediately following the introduction to his new home, a bit startled, but seemingly healthy and curious, moving around and exploring. This dotty back is likely the smallest fish in our tank, a possible meal for the moray, and the dotty back seems to be aware of that fact. The other fish are mostly sleeping still, but the ones that are awake seem to be behaving in a cautious rather than aggressive manner. That seemed to be the case even as the day went on. Even my angry, hellish tomato clown left him alone. I have to admit, I was a bit concerned for a few hours after lights on. I could not find him anywhere, even looking deep into the caves and crevices. Given that long body, it seemed he'd be visible from some angle, so I was worried that he may have wiggled out of the tank or into one of the dual overflows. Snowflake eels are generally nocturnal and really like to dig, which is likely what was happening during this period of visual absence. Another thought was that he may have established a home facing towards the rear of the aquarium. Honestly, there are so many options for placement. That said, most of the critters eventually prefer the front of the aquarium since that is generally where the food comes from. Of course, eventually he did show up. What kind of video would it be if he didn't? Here he is. His first tunnel was dug directly under this Jason Fox Space Invader Pictinia. Interesting choice. He seems to be settling in and acting as a moray eel should. It is striking how small he looks when it is just this little head showing. I've noticed that most fish are a bit reluctant around him still, giving him plenty of space. Still, fortunately, no aggression from other fish, which is pleasantly surprising as most new additions are at least pushed around a bit. And surprisingly, a few days later, he dug a hole right through the substrate, popping out like a guard eel. Really interesting behavior. Over the next few days, he dug many more tunnels and holes, most infringing on other fish territories, but for whatever reason, not disturbing the balance or peace in the tank. Seems most of the fish view him as non-competition, which is definitely a relief. Clearly, given the digging, it is important that all my rockwork is firmly planted and secure. Most of the coral have long since fused the reef structure together, so I should be good. So we named our snowflake eel Kyle after Gru's dog in the movie Despicable Me, mostly because of how he loses his composure during feeding time. It is actually really funny to watch how he swims around like a crazy eel the second he smells frozen food hit the water. He hasn't really expressed the same behavior with dry pellets or flakes, likely because he was trained to feed on frozen krill. Here we see Kyle on the left side of the tank moving in and out of the rockwork. We have been attempting to train him to eat from his main cave on the right side of the display in order to further establish a concise territory and efficiency at feeding time. The way Kyle moves through the reef is fascinating, but most of his movement is relegated to feeding time. That said, his network of tunnels has been growing. From what I've read, they do tend to settle down into one spot as they get older. Generally, a snowflake eel will live from 5 to 15 years in captivity. So far, I've been feeding Kyle every few days. He'll eat anywhere from 5 to 7 pieces of krill in one feeding. We have noticed that he tends to be a bit hard of sight, especially when it comes to figuring out where his bits of krill are on the feeding skewer. Again, very funny and entertaining to watch, especially how he wrestles with his food. Snowflake eels have a secondary jaw behind the primary, which is how they can pull food in so quickly or pry crustaceans out of their shells. Kind of reminds me of the movie Alien. I would like to try to train him on hard pellets as well as various types of frozen fish and shrimp. Training him on other foods is mainly for dietary variety and convenience. All said, it is not without risk adding any type of moray eel to your reef, especially if you have lots of expensive and delicate shrimp and crabs. For us, Kyle has been a welcome addition to our vibrant mixed reef community, and we are happy to have him. Hey, thank you for checking out Craft Aquatic. If you enjoyed this one, please subscribe, leave a comment, and check out our other reef-related videos on our channel. Also, it is the holiday season now, so I've linked to my friend George's fascinating Holiday Village video in the description below. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I'll see you on the next video.